You're probably familiar with the many airborne operations that took place during World War II, like Crete, Normandy, or even Market Garden. But 1945 did not mark the end of the parachute. In October 2001, there was also the famous jump of the 3rd Ranger Battalion to secure an airfield in Kandahar as a spearhead of Operation Enduring Freedom. Or in March 2003, when Rangers and the 173rd Airborne Brigade boarded C-17s and conducted combat jumps in Kurdish northern provinces of Iraq to seize an airfield and support neighboring special forces from Task Force Viking. And this marked the last large-scale combat parachute operation conducted by the United States. Hello my friends and welcome to History Legends. Today we'll take a look at 5 forgotten combat jumps in modern history that you probably never heard about. I ranked them from oldest to the most recent one. Are you ready? Let's go. Number 5. The Battle of Dili, 1975, Indonesia. On December 7th, 1975, Indonesia launched Operation Seroja, the invasion of Portuguese-speaking East Timor. The mission consisted of a seaborne and airborne assault of the capital city of East Timor, Dili, which was under control of Timorese insurgents named Falintil. Most of the Falintil fighters were regular troops from the former Portuguese colonial army. They were well equipped by Portugal and carried G3 rifles. About 555 Indonesian paratroopers were to jump, 270 paracommandos from Group 1 Kopasanda, known today as Kopassus, Indonesia's special forces, and 285 men from the 501st Airborne Infantry Battalion. These paratroopers carried American-made T-10 parachutes, South Korean grenades, and Soviet-made AK-47 assault rifles. This was Indonesia's first large-scale airborne operation. Generally speaking, there was a huge lack of planning. At the airbase, the paratroopers did not get any meal, no food, and had to run around town to buy some food in restaurants before heading back to the airbase. But even worse, the officers of these paratroopers had no information about the terrain or the forces they would meet on the ground, regarding their strength or even equipment. They were going in blind. The paras were simply told not to be afraid, since the town was only held by a handful of security guards. Eventually, the first wave entered 9 C-130 Herculeses, which took off from the Iswahudi Air Force Base in Madiun. Yet nobody told the paratroopers that they would be in the air for at least 6 hours. So many ended up releasing themselves directly in the plane where they stood. The planes now approached Dili. The Indonesian Navy was so unprepared that they didn't even know that there were 3 Portuguese warships in the proximity of Dili that could have intervened. Luckily for them, nothing happened, and around 4:30 in the morning, 400 Indonesian Marines and several hundred Timorese partisans landed and faced minimal resistance as they pushed towards the city. Meanwhile, for the paratroopers at 5:45, the jump master shouted, "Go!" And after that, it was pure chaos. Immediately, they were met by the sound of enemy weapons and bullets clicking on the aircraft. One veteran recalls that enemy traces were as if fireflies filled the sky. And the worst, that the soldiers that jumped could not return fire because their AKs were strapped to their thighs. Some were airdropped directly into the sea, and others directly on Falintil forces. And these Indonesian paratroopers also ran around with 45-kilogram backpacks. They were exhausted, and this is when some of them came under friendly fire from the Marines that pushed into the town for a mopping up operation. By noon, with the support of nearby battleships, after rampaging and looting Dili, Indonesian paratroopers had taken over the city, at the cost of 35K and many more wounded, while Falintil troops withdrew to continue the fight in the mountains. In the end, Operation Seroja would be a success for Indonesia, but eventually East Timor gained independence in 1999. Number 4. Kasinga, 1978, South Africa. In 1978, South Africa planned a raid on Kasinga, a town located in Angola. This place was used as a military base by the People's Liberation Army of Namibia. Not only was it a regional HQ, but at Kasinga, insurgents would provide medical treatment for their wounded, repair equipment, and train new recruits. There were 2 major problems for the SDAF. Kasinga was located 260 kilometers away from the border deep into Angola, and photo reconnaissance has shown how the base has steadily been fortified, with many bunkers, zigzag trenches, multiple machine gun and mortar emplacements, plus anti-air cannons. Altogether, approximately 300 to 600 planned fighters defended the base. On May 4th, the raid started with multiple carpet bombing raids by 4 Canberras and 4 Buccaneers that caused devastating losses in the ranks of the insurgents that had just gathered up in the field for the roll call. They were in open ground when the bombs dropped on them. And right after, 350 South African paratroopers were airdropped by C-130 Herculeses and C-160 Transals. But smoke from the bombing run obscured the drop zone markers, with nearly all the paratroopers being dropped off target. The Paras lost the advantage of surprise, resulting in the escape of PLAN commanders they were meant to capture. Nonetheless, by 9 AM, the paratroopers regrouped and commenced the main assault on Kasinga. Their greatest challenge was when they were fired upon by a number of WW2 14.5mm multi-barrel anti-aircraft guns. But after a combination of mortar fire and maneuver, they managed to attack the trenches, which left 95 insurgents KIA for 3 fatalities for the South Africans. And after that, all major resistance in Kasinga ended. With the mission accomplished, the plan was now for 12 Puma helicopters to extract the paratroopers. And this is when a Cuban mechanized battalion, with dozens of armored vehicles and tanks, approached the assembling area in open ground of the South African paratroopers. The Cubans approached as the paratroopers were just there waiting to be picked up. Disaster was averted when close air support and 22 men of an anti-tank platoon stopped the Cubans. Despite the success of the mission, with very little casualties, the top insurgent leaders escaped, and 40 enemy fighters taken as prisoner, intended to be taken back to South Africa for interrogation, had to be released to lighten the helicopters. For subsequent actions, South Africa would launch armored raids rather than air assaults. Before moving to number 3 and presenting you today's sponsor, Presidis. Presidis is a brand that pays tribute to World War II veterans and cares about them. They even make donations and share a percentage of their sales with veterans, associations, and museums. And this is why Presidis sent me this beautiful watch. The A11 Tom Rice edition. Tom Rice was a paratrooper in the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment as a platoon sergeant. He fought from Normandy, Holland, Bastogne, all the way to the end of the war in Germany. On D-Day, taken under fire of German flak anti-aircraft artillery, Tom Rice jumped out despite the high speed of the aircraft, bounced off the fuselage of the plane, and lost his own army-issued A11 watch. When the folks at Presidis heard his story, they set about recreating his lost watch, but with a modern interpretation of the one Tom Rice had worn to pay tribute to his service and everything World War II veterans had been through. Even better, Tom Rice celebrated his 100th birthday by jumping out of a C-47, just like he did in 1944, and this while wearing his lost watch, the A11 Tom Rice. So make sure to get yours by clicking the link in the description. It's a must-have for veterans, World War II enthusiasts, and vintage watch collectors. The A11 Tom Rice will be yours by clicking the link in the description. Number 3. Kolwezi, 1978, France. Only a few days after the airborne raid on Kasinga, in May 1978, an uprising took place in Zaire in the province of Katanga. 4,000 Katangese rebels took about 3,000 European workers and their families from the mining city of Kolwezi as hostages. And by May 15th, 170 Europeans and about 700 Africans had been executed. Many of these workers were French or Belgian. And on the 16th, France immediately deployed the 2nd Regiment of Paratroopers of the French Foreign Legion, the 2nd RAP. They were flown directly to Zaire. On the 19th of May, the first wave, 450 men of the 2nd RP, boarded 2 Transals and 4 Herculeses, and they jumped onto the old hippodrome of the city, knowing they would face an enemy 10 times more numerous. The drop was performed under fire from light infantry weapons, and 6 men were wounded as they landed, while another was isolated from his unit, killed and mutilated in the streets before even removing his parachute. After these incidents, the French regrouped and started the assault of Kolwezi. French snipers armed with FR-F1 pinned down rebel groups, while the paratroopers deployed into the city. At 3 PM, the legionnaires halted a rebel relief force composed of armored vehicles. At a distance of 50 meters, they unleashed anti-tank rockets and small arms fire, which destroyed 2 of the 3 vehicles. By 6 PM, the city was under French control and mostly secured. During the night, rebels attempted to infiltrate but were stopped by an ambush prepared by the French Foreign Legion. At 6:30 AM on the 20th, another wave of 250 paratroopers was dropped east of the city and occupying this part of the city before noon. This group entered the P2 quarter and discovered the massacres that occurred there. Also on the 20th of May, The Belgian Paracommando Regiment landed on the airport and started evacuating Europeans towards the airport, leaving the securing of the city to the French. By the afternoon of the 20th of May, Kolwezi was liberated by the 2nd REP, and 2,200 Europeans and 3,000 Africans were evacuated. The Katangese rebels lost about 250 killed and 160 prisoners, and left behind most of their weapons and heavy military equipment. During this two-day battle, the French 2nd RP lost 5 killed and 25 wounded. Overall, the operation was an illustration of the efficiency and effectiveness of light infantry when used with the element of surprise and with good intelligence and logistics. Number 2. Operation Black Thunderstorm, 2009, Pakistan. In spring 2009, despite a secret peace deal with the Pakistani government, Taliban forces grew in strength and confidence and came within 100 kilometers of Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan. The Pakistani military had to react and launched an operation with 30 to 40,000 troops against the Swat Valley, the headquarters of the Taliban, to regain all the lost territory in the previous month. Problem is, Pakistan would face 5,000 Taliban fighters with lots of military experience, and they would have to push through hostile terrain, forests and mountains, with only a couple small roads leading up to their objectives. So to break the deadlock, Pakistan airdropped troops behind enemy lines to secure important mountaintops, valley passes, and crossroads. The operation started with Pakistani helicopter gunships and fighter jets conducting dozens of airstrikes on Taliban hideouts using laser-guided precision bombs, which also had the added advantage of breaking the Taliban morale. Right after, a special task force composed of hundreds of members of the 50th Airborne Division and SSG commandos jumped off in the dark night of April 31st. To secure the Buner Valley. After 4 days of intense firefights in neighboring villages of the Buner Valley, the Taliban retreated, leaving behind 87 of their troops, and this battle caused the Pakistani paratroopers 4 KIA. On the 5th of May, 300 airborne troops boarded C-130 transport aircraft, jumped off, and stormed Taliban positions directly into the Swat Valley. Fighting was difficult because Taliban forces were supplied by a nearby base, basically a training camp in Shangla district. On May 10th, additional airborne teams of Pakistan Navy SEALs jumped off from C-130s and destroyed the base at the cost of 2 KIA. On May 20th, small teams of Special Service Group commandos, alongside the 9th Wing Company of the Army Rangers, were all airdropped on the Khyber Pass, and there they ambushed a Taliban reinforcement column coming from Afghanistan. In support of these airborne operations, Pakistani ground forces pushed up the Swat Valley. After losing control over Kanju, Mata, and the Takhtaban Bridge, Taliban began concentrating forces in the city of Mingora, digging trenches, laying mines, and taking positions on rooftops. On May 23rd, to dislodge the defenders, SSG Special Forces were parachuted once again behind enemy lines to cut off the retreat of the Taliban at Mingora. At the same time, Pakistani infantry and army rangers mounted on APCs entered the city. By May 27th, after days of close quarters fighting, the Pakistani military took control of 70% of the city, including the city's airport, and Taliban forces across the Swat Valley were in full retreat. And by May 30, Pakistan had full control of Mingora. Allegedly, during the urban battle for that city alone, 286 Taliban militants were KIA. After a couple skirmishes in the mountains, all Taliban resistance had ceased by June. Pakistan claims to have lost 50 KIA and 100 wounded, while taking out close to 1,500 Taliban militants. Number 1. Operation Serval, 2013, France. In June 2012, jihadists in Mali broke their lines with the Tuareg separatists and kicked them out from Gao, Timbuktu, and Kidal. And now up to 10,000 jihadists controlled all the northern part of Mali. And in January 2013, they launched an offensive against Ségou and Mopti, heavily populated areas of central Mali, and the capital Bamako was not far behind. This is when France decided to intervene to help the Malian government. In early January, hundreds of French troops arrived in the country, and with the support of the Malian army, stopped the jihadists at the Battle of Kona. And now it was time to counterattack. On the night of January 27th to the 28th, 5 planes airdropped 250 legionnaires from the 2nd REP and a commando unit of the 11th Parachute Brigade on the international airport of Timbuktu. Shortly after, A task force of about 800 men of the 21st Marine Infantry Regiment linked up with the paratroopers after a 900-kilometer dash across the desert. The next night, following a helicopter raid, French Special Forces carried out an assault landing deep into enemy-held territory on the Kidal airfield. Once the position was secured, engineers from the 17th RGP were airdropped to restore the runway infrastructure and allow air traffic to be reopened. Now they decide to push even further. On the night of February 7th, French helicopters and fighter aircraft carried out more than 30 airstrikes in support of a new air-land operation aimed at seizing the region of Tessalit near the Algerian border. French Special Forces were first parachuted on top of Tessalit Airport, once again in order to secure the runway, which then allowed an air assault of 50 paratroopers of the 1st RCP to strengthen the position around the airport. The next morning, an armed task force of the 1st RIMA carried out a 500-kilometer raid from the city of Gao in order to reinforce the French contingent deployed on the Tessalit airport. And the next day at 6 a.m., 10 paratroopers from the 17th RGP were parachuted from 2 Transals and 1 Hercules onto Tessalit Airport with 1 power generator, with 1 tractor-loader vehicle TC-910 in order to repair the runway. And 2 days later, the facility was good for military transport planes to land. No paratroopers were killed in any of these 3 airborne assaults. This aerial blitzkrieg pushed the rebels out of the major urban centers of the Niger Valley and forced them to withdraw into the mountains. After many years of counterinsurgency, the last group of French soldiers left Mali on the 15th of August 2022. That's all I have for you today. I hope you learned something new. That would make me very happy. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of this ranking. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, this video was made possible thanks to your support of my patrons and PayPal supporters. If you want to join, the link is in the description.